educational literacy campaign to engage children aged 10 to 14 to develop an interest in current affairs. It aims to interest children those ages by repackaging it in a palatable and also interesting way. Now, in partnership with the National Library Board, Join the Current are running 4 programs in libraries nationwide, using things like movies and games to interest children in otherwise complex topics like technological unemployment. Well, we now speak to the founders of the campaign, Natalie Huam, Miranda Yo, Fiona Tan and Lynette Teo. Welcome.
Hi.
And you all look so young. Before we get into the actual, the movies and the activities that around this campaign, let's start off with asking you, what prompted you to start Join the Current?
So all of us are in our final year of university, and we're about to enter the workforce. So we realized that, hey, if we know more about the world around us, and we know of the current developments that are happening globally as well as locally, that will really help us stand out, to our future employers. And then when we look to our immediate circle of friends as well as family, we realize that our younger generation actually, they're not very interested in what's happening around the world. They're more interested in celebrity gossip or what's happening amongst their friends.
Yeah, that's right. Facebook, Instagram.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we felt that this was a pressing issue that we needed to address. My parents read the news every day religiously. We've got newspapers delivered to our home, but my brother doesn't even come close to flipping or touching the newspapers. So we needed to prove this anecdotal experiences. So we had a survey for 300 parents and 300 students, and we used this survey to find out, what were their attitudes and their
news reading
habits.
Yeah. Fantastic, because I remember when I was growing up, I was saying this to Eugene earlier, is that, I sat down with my parents, we watched I know different generation, but we watched television, we watched current affairs programs, we watched the news together, we'd discuss it over dinner. And of course that just doesn't seem to really happen these days. You mentioned, Lynette, that your parents have newspapers, they subscribe to newspapers, which is great. But I think young kids, they want their news on the go, don't they? They want it on their tablet, their iPhone, whatever.
Yeah, so I think for our generation, maybe like the 20, millennials, that age range, I think the way we consume current affairs is through our social media channels. We Facebook pages of the Straits Times or Today, and that's how we actually get news when our friends share the articles. So I think now when the kids they don't really use Facebook anymore, we have to find new ways to try to engage them in current affairs topics.
Oh my gosh, the next generation. Is that why you targeted 10 to 14? It's quite young, isn't it?
Yeah, so actually we were working with National Library Board for this campaign, and they particularly wanted to target the 10 to 14 age group because they considered them the tween age. Yeah, so we wanted to reach out to them because it is the pre-teen period where they start to establish their own identity. They don't want to be seen with their parents, and we think it's a good age to start inculcating a habit where they start to tune into the world around them and to become more aware of the things that are happening around them. And I think that's when they actually challenge themselves to think more globally, so that they can also be competitive on a global scale.
It's so important to have that knowledge as well. Were you shocked by the findings, after this survey?
Actually, we were surprised that there was a discrepancy between what parents thought and what teens thought. So our survey findings found that 74% of Singaporean teens are not interested and rarely read the news. But parents, on the other hand, found that actually 63% of them reported that their kids read the news on an almost daily basis. So there's this discrepancy between what parents think their children's behavior are and what the children really self-report. So that was something that was interesting to us, and we wanted to find out how to perhaps make news more accessible and to come up with resources that parents might find useful in engaging their children in current affairs.
But what sort of news do the kids reading as opposed to what the parents think they're reading? Is it, as you mentioned, Lynette, earlier, sort of more celebrity type, gossipy news, or not hard-hitting news, right?
In general, what we found was that children would only engage in news if it's convenient or entertaining, and I think our younger generation demands more of a kind of interactive or instantaneous or entertaining kind of content. So in order for us to engage them in more serious topics, we tried to use videos, interactive buzzer quiz games, hands-on activities to make them discuss and do group work in our sessions together. And we found that a lot of them actually volunteered their ideas and opinions on important issues that would affect them in future. For example, technology replacing human jobs, and what implications that could mean for them when they enter the workforce. And we found that engaging them on that level and making it fun for them allowed them to see the relevance between news and themselves.
When we went out to speak to some children to ask like, oh, what news have you read recently, we found that a lot of them they like news that had human interest elements to it. For example, like those terrorism attacks, like they would say things like, oh, we feel very sad listening to these kind of news. So I think it's human interest kind of stories that the kids are really interested about. Like when it comes to economy or politics, that's where it kind of
and hopefully by expressing those emotions as well, they're actually maybe just absorbing it more in a way, those news items. So Lynette, you mentioned that you get newspapers at home. What about you, Fiona, Miranda, and Natalie? Sorry, thank you. What about the three of you? Do you sit down and watch news with your parents? Do you read the newspapers?
Well, I actually grew up with a mom who took a very active role in trying to encourage me to be tuned into what's going on around me. So she would cut out newspaper articles and leave them on my table, and at times she would even use correction tape to blank out certain words in the paper and get me to fill it in. So then it was more of an activity that got me thinking and reading, and she hoped that would broaden my knowledge of the world and also develop my vocabulary. And I think because I grew up in an environment where my mom was very active in encouraging me to think broadly, that helped me as I was growing up. And I hope to be a journalist when I graduate, and that's one of the experiences that I had growing up that shaped the way I looked at the world.
Fantastic. You can become an intern, do an internship. You're in the right place. And how about you, Natalie and Fiona?
Personally, for me, when I was much younger, about like a whole decade ago, my father used to send me to school when I was in primary school and my earlier parts of secondary school. So whenever we were in the car in the morning, he would intentionally tune the radio to like news channels, and then we would hear the news together in the morning, and he would often talk to me about it. So he would ask me about what I think about certain pieces of news, and then we would comment on it in that short like 20-minute journey. So I think that was a good it was a good start for me, because there was a time when I started to tune into news more, and I think that 20-minute journey, because we did it every single day, it eventually became a habit, and that's something that we are trying to do with our campaign. We are hoping to create this new culture where current affairs can be introduced as a habit from a young age. And when we manage to get children to be curious about current affairs, I think that curiosity will bring them far in life, and they will naturally be tuned into news even as they grow older in the future.
Fantastic. And Fiona?
Yeah, for me, my parents, we usually discuss about news during meal times, dinner times. I think this is a very how to put it. It's a very convenient time, when the family gets together, you eat the meal together and then you watch news. It's very convenient, and I think other parents can do the same as well. Yeah,
definitely. And the four of you, as you said, you're in the final year of uni here in Singapore. Do you think it's helped you? At a young age, having watched the news with your parents, read newspapers, helped you through your university studies?
I think for me it definitely helped, because I think that's why we all end up becoming communication students, because we kind of have an interest in this area, in journalism and news and current affairs. I think it helps also because when we speak to our friends, or even when we do our homework, for example in junior college, when we have to write essays, we have the general knowledge that we were equipped with through reading the news or through listening to news on radio. So I think it's very subtle assistance that we have when we have knowledge of news around us, but I think it's something that has subconsciously helped us to also mature as young adults.
Fantastic. You're listening to the Culture Café here on 938 Live with me, Justine Moss, and I'm speaking with 4 young ladies who have founded Join the Current. It's an educational literacy campaign to engage children aged 10 to 14 to develop that interest in current affairs. I'm speaking with Natalie, Miranda, Fiona and Lynette, and we'll come back and talk a little bit more later about what sort of movies and games and other activities they've come up with to interest children in otherwise sort of complex current affairs topics. We'll return in just a moment. I'm speaking with 4 young founders of Join the Current. It's an educational literacy campaign to engage kids aged just 10 to 14 to develop an interest in current affairs. And I'm speaking with Natalie, Huam, Miranda Yo, Fiona Tan and Lynette Teo. Now, ladies, we were talking about, the impetus, I guess, behind this campaign. It sounds so interesting. Let's talk about the findings of that survey that you did with the parents and the kids and how they kind of didn't quite match what the kids were saying to what the parents were saying. What's your most worrying finding?
I think the most worrying finding for us that one out of 3 children are not curious about events happening in the world. That's a third of them who are simply not curious about the reality that they live in and the world that is changing every single day. For us, we feel that curiosity is one of the greatest enablers that we have, and it's essential that our younger generation continues to stay curious about the rapidly changing environment that we live in. Our world is so much more complex now, with issues like global warming, technological advancements, aging population, and lots of food crisis to solve, and all this starts with being curious first, to for our younger generation to learn about why things are the way they are now before we can, as a young generation, come up with the right answers. So for us, our aim here was to spark that curiosity and to reignite that curiosity about changes that are happening in the world around us.
And do you think your peers, if you think, you're at uni, if you think of your uni mates, do they have that same interest, or they weren't exposed to news when they were at school? Do you have, I know the 4 of you are doing communications, and so you're interested in all of that. But what about some of your friends? Are they as interested in what's happening in the world, whether it's here or...
I think because we are from a communication school, so most of our peers are generally interested in what appears in the media and what trends are happening right now. But if you perhaps look beyond our school, our experiences with our peers, perhaps in hall or perhaps in other areas of our school life, that interest is not as pronounced. Like perhaps only when bigger events like a general election comes around, or like a huge tragedy like the Sabah earthquake and natural disaster takes place, or like last year when founding Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew passed away. That's when you start seeing younger Singaporeans like us get invested in what's happening. But beyond that, I think it would be helpful for us to have a habit of consistently learning about the changes that are happening in smaller ways as well, not just the big disasters and changes that happen.
Yeah, or those stories that affect Singaporeans or people at home, and there's so much more else happening offshore as well. Now, you're in collaboration or in partnership with the National Library Board, and you're running 4 programs in the libraries nationwide. Yes. Tell us a bit more about that and what movies, games...
Okay, so because we wanted to use something that was more visually appealing to the children, so we usually start off our program with this movie called I, Robot. So I, Robot is about, it tells the story of the futuristic world of 2035, where robots begin to take over human jobs and jobs that are lower skilled. So through the movie, we then link them to articles that are in the newspapers. For example, Japan has unleashed a robot revolution where they want to replace many jobs with robots, and they also have a new robot receptionist who would attend. I know, right?
It's scary.
I know. Yeah, so this robot receptionist would attend to hotel guests and all that. So when we drew the relevance between the movie and what is happening in the real world, it helped the children to establish their relevance between current affairs and also fiction. So through that, we wanted to show them that actually current affairs is not all dry and boring. It is just things that are happening around us and shaping our daily reality. Yeah, and after that, we actually have some games like buzzer games and all that.
Yeah. After the movie, we'll play like buzzer games and also quizzes involving like play cards. So for the buzzer game, it's like a fastest fingers first. So
Children
kids
get really competitive.
they'll be grouped into like groups of 4 or 5, and then they'll
They have to
compete.
they have to compete
to
the questions
answer the
first.
questions. Yeah, and for the play cards, it's more about information literacy, because we find that information literacy and current affairs, they go hand in hand. There's actually a link between them. So we'll show like different questions to the kids, and then ask them whether they find that this statement is a fact or is an opinion, and they have to raise the play cards to show us whether they think that it's a fact or opinion. So
very cute.
yeah, kids actually love that game.
Fantastic, gosh, and that's across how many libraries across?
4 libraries.
4 libraries,
Yeah.
and they are.
We've been to Woodlands Library, Central Public Library, Pasir Ris Library just yesterday, and our next one will be at Central.
Yeah, we're back at
Museum.
Central Library.
Our workshops are called Real versus Real. Yeah, so REAL versus REEL.
REEL.
So that draws to the movie.
That's
as well,
brilliant.
yeah.
Okay, so 4 libraries nationwide, and you kind of covered, geographically, Singapore there. Certainly, those 4 libraries, fantastic. Now, just talking about, mainstream media. I mean, you're on mainstream media now. But how do you think, if you're looking at mainstream media and non-social media, obviously, how much further what can we do, print, TV, radio, how can we engage younger viewers in current affairs?
I think for now, it's not really a habit for young people to pick up the physical paper. And with so many other platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and even Snapchat, what comes across to young people nowadays is what appears on our feeds and what parents or educators directly engage us in. So I think for news to evolve to fit younger viewers, it has to take on a more personable voice to grab attention and eyeballs, perhaps in the form of like multimedia live blogs, interactive polling, or with articles with videos embedded in it, more thought-provoking features and long-form essays, and I think also opinion pieces that challenge mainstream schools of thought. I think these are the things that would engage young viewers and challenge us to develop an identity through reading more.
I feel like the younger generation likes to be challenged. They like to, they like to have a stake in what's going on in the news. So they don't just want to be told the news, they want to have a say. So I think when you challenge them, you ask them questions, that really makes them more interested in, having their piece out there. So
It's so important to have that interaction.
that conversation between.
And I think young viewers also appreciate stories with a more human interest sort of angle. For instance, like the whole Straits Times Singaporean of the Year series that celebrated Singaporeans and the achievements that they have made. I think that was a great example of the kind of human interest story that generates interest and celebrates Singaporeans, and I think many young people like us appreciate those kind of news.
And there's something about those human interest stories that really draw you in, whether you're reading, the Today newspaper, or whether you're watching Channel 5 News or Channel News Asia News as well. It's just something about you. It's almost like a connection, isn't it?
It's more relevant, I guess.
Yeah, more exactly. Where can we find you and find out more? You've got a Facebook page.
Yeah, we've got a Facebook page. It's Join the Current, and we've also got a website, www.jointhecurrent.com, and you can also follow us on Instagram too. So it's Join the Current. It's Join the Current everything.
I was going to say, you've got everything absolutely covered there. So
Join the current.
good. Well, we will all definitely find you. Is there anything else more we can do? Just before we finish up with the Culture Café, is there anything more that we can do in terms of engaging these youngsters with current affairs? What do you think?
Well, I think we need to have more conversation with the children, so more direct conversation to ask them what's happening in the news, instead of just telling them, hey, go do this, go do that. We actually show them that, hey, we also have an interest in news, so we should be going out there talking to the kids. We've also come up with a few ways for kids themselves to join the current. Some of them might not be very conventional. For example, we encourage them to, bring the newspapers into the toilet and read them all.
If that's the only time they've got,
I actually used to do that, embarrassingly. We also encourage them to there's actually a Wikipedia current affairs portal, so there's a lot of tools online that kids can use. There's one more that we thought that was really useful too. Get kids to cut out news articles and paste them on the fridge. So every time they're hungry, they're also reminded of what's happening around the
and
world.
they're looking, yeah, exactly. Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate you coming on to the Culture Cafe here on 938 Live. It's been totally enlightening. I'm glad that you're spreading the word, and hopefully, those 10 to 14-year-olds, again, when they're growing up and interested in current affairs, then they'll be also giving back to youngsters as well. I've been speaking with Natalie, Huam, Miranda Yo, Fiona Tan, Lynette Teo, 4 young founders of this campaign called Join the Current. It's an educational literacy campaign to engage children aged 10 to 14 to develop an interest in current affairs. Go find them on Facebook, Instagram, website. You'll see them everywhere online. Ladies, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having us.